Welcome to The Explainer. Grab your notebooks because today you and I are going full historical investigator. We're dusting off a 125-year-old cold case file to figure out exactly why the world's most infamous serial killer was never caught. We're going to peel back all those layers of myth and look strictly at the hard facts of the 1888 Whitechapel murders. To understand why this case is still unsolved, we're going to run through the files. We'll look at the ultimate cold case, the canonical 5 victims, the 1888 crime scene, how the 1888 police stack up against modern forensics, and finally, the media and those infamous letters.
All right, part 1, the ultimate cold case, reopening the Whitechapel murders file.
125 years. I mean, think about that. Over a century has passed since this 1888 murder spree, yet these crimes remain literally the most studied in history. So why? Out of all the crimes out there, why does this specific case endure in our collective memory when so many others just fade away? Well, it's really about what the killer represented. You know, compared to modern standards, he wasn't actually that prolific, and he wasn't even active for very long. But what he did do was brutally expose the terrifying, sordid underbelly of Victorian society. He basically forced the wealthy elite of London to look right at these horrific social conditions they had completely ignored. He became the physical embodiment of the East End's darkest nightmares. Moving on to part 2, the canonical 5 victims, and a brutally compressed time frame. If you dig into the actual police records, the generic Whitechapel murders file actually lists 11 victims in total. But as investigators, we mostly focus on 5 specific women, the canonical 5. Now, actually, keep your investigator hat on here, because this isn't 100% set in stone. Some experts argue there could be as few as 4 true victims, or maybe as many as 8. But these 5, they form the absolute core of the accepted investigation. When we map out the timeline, it is astonishingly fast. This entire reign of terror lasted just over 12 weeks in the autumn of 1888. It started with Mary Nichols in late August, escalated through September, which included that horrific double event where Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes were murdered on the exact same night, and it culminated with the awful death of Mary Kelly in November. Just 12 weeks to spawn a century-old legend. So here is the kicker. Despite this massive, intense, incredibly localized manhunt, the guy just vanished. Over the years, we've seen over 100 named suspects. Some actually make sense, like Aaron Kosminski. Others, utterly ridiculous, like author Lewis Carroll. Really? But at the end of the day, no one was ever brought to justice. To figure out how the killer slipped the police dragnet, we have to look at part 3, the 1888 crime scene, or what we'll call the locked room of the East End slums. The East End wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a total labyrinth. Picture this locked room maze of tiny, pitch-black, diseased alleyways. You had a massive underclass fighting a daily battle for survival against starvation and extreme poverty. For a predator, it was the ultimate hunting ground. You could strike, step back into the dark maze, and instantly disappear. And what's really staggering is the geography of it all. You've got the destitute East End, just a hotbed of vice and crime, and then literally right next door, right on its doorstep, is the city of London, the wealthiest square mile on earth. The contrast is mind-boggling. The rich were completely oblivious to the squalor happening just a few streets over, until these murders violently forced them to pay attention. Okay, let's get into the real forensic breakdown. Part 4, 1888, police versus modern forensics. Why did he escape? Looking at the case files, this is the million-dollar question we have to ask ourselves. How did he slip through their fingers? They were dealing with the most heavily scrutinized crime in history, and they just kept coming up empty-handed. Think about it. If this horrific spree happened today, it's a completely different story. Law enforcement would pull CCTV, run DNA profiling, bring in forensic psychologists, game over, right? But the 1888 police, they were incredibly outgunned. They were navigating unlit labyrinth streets without flashlights or radios. And worse, basic forensic science practically didn't exist yet. Blood typing, securing a crime scene, fingerprinting, nope. They were quite literally fighting a ghost in the dark. Finally, let's wrap up with part 5, the media and the letters. We need to see how the press turned a local tragedy into an international phenomenon. You really can't overstate the absolute frenzy of the global newspaper coverage. Journalists swarmed the East End. I mean, they were hailing cops, bribing officials for exclusive scoops, and ripping the authorities apart in daily columns. And by blasting out these sensationalized updates every single day, they weren't just reporting the news, they were actively constructing this larger-than-life, menacing supervillain. Which leads us to what is probably the most pivotal moment in the whole legend. And weirdly enough, it wasn't even a murder. It was a letter. In late September 1888, a piece of correspondence known as the Dear Boss letter gets sent to a London news agency. And right at the bottom was this chilling sign-off. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. That one line, it completely set the public imagination on fire. It turned an unknown killer into a dark, mythic figure overnight. But, and here's a massive plot twist for our investigation, both the Victorian cops back then and modern experts today pretty much agree this letter was a total hoax. It was almost certainly cooked up by an opportunistic journalist just looking to sell more papers. Crazy, right? This whole sequence of events just totally derailed the actual police investigation. Look at the domino effect. First, a journalist likely makes up the name and fakes the letter. Second, the press hypes it up. Third, the public reads it, and suddenly the authorities are drowning in an absolute avalanche of fake copycat letters. We're talking thousands of them. It brought the investigation to the brink of a total meltdown, wasting precious time and resources chasing ghosts created by the media. So as we close the file on this explainer, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. Based on everything we've uncovered today, was this killer actually a dark, untouchable evil genius? Or was he simply a terrible byproduct of poverty, a violent symptom of endemic squalor who used unlit streets to his advantage and just got incredibly lucky he struck before the invention of modern forensics? It really changes how you look at history's most infamous cold case, doesn't it? Thanks for investigating with me.